Running any government is not a simple task at all, because in order to make a government function efficiently, many laws and rules and policies are required. And these laws and rules establish the relationship that the state is supposed to share with its citizens and the relationship that the citizens are supposed to share amongst themselves. So this is a very difficult task. Now, from where can we get laws and rules and policies? These can only be instituted by a constitution, because a constitution lays out the various laws and rules that govern a country as a whole. Immediately after India attained its independence, this country now required all kinds of laws and rules to deal with a series of great and very grave challenges. In our last lesson, we learnt about some of the challenges that cropped up immediately following India attaining independence. And so, it was very important to have a unified and centralized government at this point of time. Because if it was only one politician or one group of politicians who ruled the country, then invariably certain sections of the population would gain precedence and preeminence over the rest. And for this, further confusion and conflicts might have arisen in the country. And so it was very important to now have a constitution for the country. In this lesson, we will be talking about how the framing of the Indian constitution happened and how this constitution sought to provide remedy and solutions to the challenges that India was facing after attaining independence. The Constitution of India was drafted by the Constituent Assembly, and this work happened between December 1946 and November 1949. Now, upon hearing the date December 1946, you might be surprised, because during this time the colonial rule was still very much there in the subcontinent. So how were these members of the Constituent Assembly drafting a constitution for India? This was because the Cabinet Mission of 1946 stated that now India could have a Constituent Assembly for the drafting of its constitution. And so around 300 members from several parts of the subcontinent joined hands and they now formed the Constituent Assembly. In its initial stages, the Constituent Assembly was holding its meetings in New Delhi. And between 1946 and 1949, it drafted the Constitution of India that then came to be as the largest constitution in the entire world. The Indian Constitution was officially adopted on 26th January 1950. But you might be tempted to question that when the Constituent Assembly had finished drafting the Constitution by November 1949, why did it wait for 2 more months to finally adopt the Constitution on 26th January 1950? This also has a particular reason. In the Lahore session of Congress in 1929, the Purna Swaraj resolution was passed. And Jawaharlal Nehru had stated that on 26th January 1930, India would celebrate its Independence Day. But unfortunately enough, India did not attain its independence by 26th January 1930. But an emotion and nostalgia were associated with this particular date, 26th January. And to this end, the Indian Constitution was officially adopted on 26th January 1950. Before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. When was the Indian Constitution officially adopted? Was it adopted on 15th August 1947, 26th December 1949, 23rd January 1950 or on 26th January 1950? Well, the correct answer is 26th January 1950. It was on this day that the Indian Constitution was officially adopted, and henceforth this day is celebrated as the Republic Day in India. Now, over this series of 3 long years, the makers of the Constitution spent a whole lot of time to make the Constitution a very healthy and immune one, immune to the various changes and conflicts that India was going through at that point of time. The Indian masses have never enjoyed voting rights, but now it was this Indian Constitution that introduced universal adult franchise. What does this mean? Under this concept of universal adult franchise, the Indian Constitution granted voting rights to all Indians who were above the age of 21. And so from this point of time, all Indians above the age of 21 were now accorded the political right to vote for their candidates in both state and national elections. Now, this was a major breakthrough that was instituted by the Indian Constitution. This is also for many reasons. Let us learn about some of those reasons. Universal adult franchise in nations like the UK and the USA had been granted in stages, because franchise rights were not accorded very easily to the people of the UK or the USA. In the initial stage, franchise rights were given to men who had property of a certain amount. And then the middle class members got their franchise rights. And only after a lot of fight, after a lot of resistance, did the working class members get their franchise rights. And so the franchise rights in these countries have been granted in stages, as we can see here. But instead, India took a major leap in this regard, because since its inception, the Constitution of India introduced universal adult franchise, and all the people in this country now got the right to vote. Let me tell you another important thing here. While the franchise rights were granted in stages in countries like the UK and the USA, women did not initially get their voting rights. Women had to fight a lot in the suffragette movements, following which they got their voting rights. But India had taken a step forward in this regard as well, because India did not discriminate among its citizens on the basis of caste, class, or even gender. All Indian citizens above the age of 21 could now exercise their voting rights. The Indian Constitution also granted equality before law to all the citizens. So the Indian Constitution strove to remove discriminations and hierarchy from the society, because earlier on there was no centralized law that would govern all the people. Various provinces, various kingdoms had their own governing systems. And more often than not, people were discriminated against on the basis of their caste, on the basis of their class. And so not all people had equal access to the laws, equal access to various rights and opportunities. But the Indian Constitution guaranteed equality before law to all the citizens, irrespective of their caste, gender, or religious affiliation. The Indian Constitution was also striving to remove all kinds of evil practices that the country was enmeshed in earlier on. we know about the caste system that hierarchized the Indian society. And the upper caste members used to treat the lower caste members as the untouchables. And this issue pervaded the Indian society for many centuries and generations. And when the Indian Constitution now came into being, it now removed the evil practice of untouchability. And so, untouchability was now described as a slur and a blot on the fair name of India. Now, what do we understand by a slur and a blot? Let me explain this to you. By a slur, we mean a derogatory or a negative remark. And by a blot, we mean a stain. So, this practice of untouchability had actually put a stain, a blot on the fair name, on the reputation of India. And so the first thing that the Constitution of India had to do was to completely abolish this practice of untouchability. And so the Indian Constitution sought to make all the citizens equal before law, so that all of them enjoyed the same rights, same civil liberties. They enjoyed same opportunities in the country. The lower caste members and the untouchables have been oppressed and exploited in the worst possible ways in the Indian subcontinent for many centuries. Because these people were not treated with dignity and honor. They were reduced to nothing, so to speak. They had to do menial work and they were treated as outcasts. Even their presence was considered polluting by the upper caste members. While the Constitution sought to remove this practice of untouchability from the Indian society from this point of time, it now also sought to guarantee reservation for the people of these depressed communities. Because these people have suffered for many generations. They did not have access to proper employment opportunities. Rising up the social ladder was never an option for these untouchables or the outcasts. And so now reservation was to be made for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. And they were to enjoy reservations in the fields of legislature, jobs in government sectors and educational institutions. Because if these depressed communities like the scheduled castes or the scheduled tribes did not have these reservations, then it would have been impossible for them to be at par with the members who have oppressed them for centuries. Because the upper caste members could run for various offices, they could do government jobs, they could enter the educational institutions, and to bring the lower caste members, to bring the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes at par with them, the Constitution of India now granted reservations to these people. Now, India has never had a proper centralized government. And after India attained its independence, now came a huge issue that also posed a challenge to the unity of the nation as a whole. Because the issue that cropped up was now coming in the form of division of powers. Several debates and discussions took place between the members of the Constituent Assembly. They now tried to think and properly sort out this division of powers between the central and the state governments. Because for the first time in the history, India was now having a central government. But what would be the relationship between the central and the state governments? What kind of powers would the central and the state governments enjoy? The masses were split in terms of their opinions with respect to this division of power. Some people were of the opinion that the center should be a very strong force, because only a strong center would be in a position to think and plan for the well-being of the country as a whole. So without a proper central government that would have a set of centralized laws and rules and regulations, the country would fall apart. So it was very important to have a very strong center. But on the other hand, another group of people posited that the initial responsibility for the well-being of the people of the provinces should rest with the provincial government. So these section of the population wanted to have very strong provincial governments, because they thought that these provincial governments, which would be local in nature, would take care of the interests, the demands, the requirements of the population in the provinces. But on the other hand, it was also important to have a strong center. So this is how various sections of the population were split with regard to their opinion on the division of powers. Now, what did the Constitution of India do? The Constitution of India now stated 3 lists which would divide power between the central government and the state governments. Those 3 lists are the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. Let us now learn what kind of things are controlled under the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. The union list includes taxes, defense, and foreign affairs. So these 3 things which are of crucial importance, like the taxation system, the defense of the country, foreign affairs, that is to say, the relationship that India would now have with other foreign powers, came under the union list. And the union list is controlled by the central government. Then we have the state list. The state list includes education and health. So these are things that are to be taken care of by the individual states. Following the union list and the state list, we have the concurrent list, and this includes forest and agriculture. Now, who is in charge of this concurrent list? This concurrent list is controlled both by the central government as well as the state governments. So while the state government has complete control over education and health, forest and agriculture are controlled by both the central government as well as the state governments. So this is how the Constitution of India sought to strike a balance in order to achieve at a common ground with regard to the division of powers. Another issue that the Indian constitution makers had to take care of was the linguistic issue. What do we understand by this? India is a multilinguistic country. Several people in different regions of the country speak their own languages. And this country boasts of a multi-ethnic, a multilinguistic culture. Various groups of people have their own languages. And when India became independent, it was suddenly very difficult to name one language as the national language. Because how could the constitution makers give dominance to one language over the others? There are so many languages that are spoken in different parts of the country. And so, debates arose on the matter of naming one language as the national language. Now, it was not possible to have Hindi as the national language. Hindi is spoken mostly in the northern and the western parts of the country. But what about other languages which are spoken in other parts of the country? All these people were wanting to have their own language as the national language. So debates and discussions now arose on this issue. So as we mentioned, it was not possible to have Hindi as the national language. Because if Hindi would be the national language of the country, then the people living in the southern parts of the country would feel alienated. Because they don't speak Hindi. They have their own languages which come from Dravidian languages. And so, while speaking in the Constituent Assembly, T.T. Krishnamachari conveyed a warning on behalf of people of the South. That is to say, the people of the South now warned and they threatened that they would recede from the Indian dominion if Hindi was made the national language of the country. So the constitution makers found it very difficult to finally arrive at a solution to resolve this issue pertaining to this language. And so the official language of the country was made Hindi. Hindi became the official language and it still continues to be the official language of the country. In various official proceedings, Hindi is used. And then the language that was used in courts, services as well as communication between the states was English. Now the masses did not also want to have English as the national language because it was the language of the colonizers. But Hindi was not a language that was spoken by all the people of the country. And so in order to establish communication between the states, in order to take care of the court proceedings or in various services, English was now used. And so these two languages still continue to be used in the country. All this while, we have been talking at great length on the Constitution of India and how it sought to resolve many issues on different grounds. The Constitution of India wanted to achieve national unity, to bring all the masses together, to have one official language that the masses could use for official purposes. The Constitution of India also granted voting rights to all adult citizens in the country. It also granted reservation for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. Now, while we talk about the Constitution, we should also make a mention of the Constituent Assembly. And in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar played a very crucial role. Knowledgeable and highly educated as B.R. Ambedkar was, he put forward a lot of reasons and arguments. And on account of these arguments and these well put reasons, the Constituent Assembly was able to arrive at the solutions to various problems. It was he who played a very crucial role in instituting the reservation system for the scheduled tribes and the scheduled castes. And for his contributions to the making of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is often called the father of the Indian Constitution. So as we mentioned, Ambedkar was instrumental in securing constitutional protection for the scheduled caste communities. He himself belonged to a lower caste. And so since his childhood during colonial rule, he was subject to oppression and discriminations. He saw how the lower caste members, the outcasts, the untouchables suffered very badly at the hands of the upper caste members, the upper caste zamindars and landowners. And so after he came back from the US in 1919, Ambedkar played a very crucial role in Indian politics because he wrote a huge number of essays and speeches, and these speeches were delivered. These speeches were directed against this caste system and the caste hierarchy. He sought to establish equality in society. And so when India got independence, Ambedkar took it upon himself to do something for the lower caste members, for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. And to this end, he introduced the reservation system to the Indian Constitution. Because Ambedkar was of the opinion that only political democracy will not be helpful for these people who have been depressed and oppressed and exploited for several centuries. Because if these lower caste members or the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes had only political rights, how far would they go? Only by casting a vote and playing a part in the electoral process, they would not be able to progress in their lives. And so, it was very crucial to ensure economic and social democracy for these people as well. By these, we mean that these reservations were meant to uplift the lower caste members, uplift the members of the backward castes. So these people who never had access to money, to jobs, to resources were now being given reservation in jobs and educational institutions. And so they were now being able to move away from the clutches of caste discrimination. They were being given a space in the society as a whole. So along with political democracy, these people also required economic and social democracy, and these things were assured and granted by the reservation system. This brings us to an end of our discussion on the framing of the Constitution of India. In this lesson, we talked at great length how the newly independent nation that was India was faced with a whole lot of challenges. And in order to take care of these challenges, to strike a balance in the society and the political system, the Constitution brought about many reforms and policies. And so the Constitution firstly introduced universal adult franchise so that the masses now got the power, the authority to elect their own representatives who would run the country. And at the same time, the Constitution also took care of the issue pertaining to the division of power. So the central and the state governments were given their own powers. The Constitution also granted reservation for the depressed caste members. And with this, we end our discussion on how the Constitution was striving to bring solutions to the table. In our subsequent lesson, we will be talking about another important issue that cropped up in post-independence India, and that was the reorganization and integration of the various states. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.